What is up, people? I am going to go through the review guide for you, so I'm just gonna make sure I got my nice little pen here. Do a nice little. Let's do this purpley blue, whatever it is. I don't even know anymore. So I'm gonna go through topic one and two, and then a little bit of three, but I feel like three's pretty straightforward. So, um, anyway, so the first thing that we talked about was political socialization and ideology. So I'll go through these two things really quick. Socialization, to be socialized, means that you come to understand your place in society. When you're being politically socialized, it means that you come to understand your beliefs and understandings about politics and your political leanings and ideologies. So things that we talk about, like agents of socialization. So things that lead you to understand politics. And then ideology is like, what are your actual ideas? So, one key distinction is that conservative and liberal are ideologies, not political parties. We have political parties that tend to lean uh, one way or the other, either more conservative or more liberal. So, the difference is always going to boil down between economic and social issues. Usually foreign policy issues play a role as well, but for the most part the two parties and ideologies are pretty much in lockstep with foreign policy. So we're looking at economic issues and social issues, and then also change in society as well. So there's a there's a couple diagrams in the slides related to this, but basically, I'll have you go over that. I'm not going to look at it myself because it warrant another video, but we're looking at government involvement in these issues. So, if you want less government involvement in economic issues, but more regulation in social issues, that's generally a conservative position. So, to be economically conservative means less government involvement in the economy. To be socially conservative means you want more regulation, or more, sometimes that means government involvement in social behaviors, so more like traditional family values kinds of things. On the flip side, to be liberal, if you're economically liberal, you generally want more government um, intervention in the economy. And if you're economically, or sorry, I did it again, socially liberal, you want less regulation over people's social behavior. So things like legalizing drugs, marriage equality, being pro choice versus pro life. Those are all socially liberal positions. And then change in society, liberals generally seek change. That's why they're sometimes called progressive. So seeking progress, as it were, in society. Whereas conservatives want to conserve or tend to be more against change, more traditional. And then sometimes you can go to the extreme. Extreme conservatism is what's called reactionary, which means you want to like go backwards in society. So you should be able to look at. We did a lot of practice with this, and they're still on the slides. Practice with looking at an issue and deciding if that position is socially or economically liberal or conservative. And then two factors that affect people's political socialization. So we read an article on this. I've had you reflect on your own. There's some info on the slides. So thinking about family, education, the media, political parties, peer groups, religion, all those sorts of things that can play a role in your political affiliation. And then we also gave some specific examples of this thing called generational factors, which are things that happen to people in your kind of age cohort that would influence everybody's political beliefs. So, for example, baby boomers kind of came of age during Vietnam era, and that caused a lot of distrust in the government, which led to a lot more conservatism in the 80s and 90s amongst baby boomers in general. Would be a generational factor. Millennials came of age during uh, technology boom, economic depression, or not depression, but the big economic recession, and then the war on terror. So those things are going to influence millennials in general in terms of their political views. Moderate independent, I don't know if I specifically talked about it, but those are going to be people that are in between being very liberal or very conservative. And independent means you don't have a political party. So that was that topic. The second topic we discussed was linkage institutions, which are organizations that link people to government. The specific ones we really focused on were political parties and interest groups, but you also have the media as a big linkage institution, which is why they played a role in our election project. So, we talked about political parties, which are organizations that have similar ideas about how to govern, that try to organize and win elections and help candidates via funding, strategy, voting. And then when they get in government, they call it the party in governance, actually getting policies passed that reflect those views. So the two parties in America are the Republicans and the Democrats. We also have a number of third parties, but we have a two-party system in America for a variety of reasons, mostly because of just the rules of the game, the way that it works out. Whoever gets the most votes ends up winning the election. They don't need a majority. Um, Most of the time, that's going to be the Democrats and the Republicans that get the most votes, one of those two candidates. So a lot of people feel like they're just kind of throwing their vote away if they vote for a third party candidate. The media is kind of biased towards the two party system because they tend to focus on what the Democrats and Republicans are doing and don't give a lot of coverage to third parties. Going off the top of my head here, kind of a lot of things actually in America are on issues were relatively set. There's only a few relatively few amount of things that most Americans disagree on, and the two major political parties have kind of captured those things, and they're always adjusting to what the new issues are that people have. So, two party system in America. An interest group is a little bit different from a political party. It usually focuses on one or two key issues and also doesn't run specific candidates. They just try to gain influence on elections. So, we talked about their different processes that they can do that. Lobbying, which is hiring people to actually gain influence with politicians in the government. um, Electioneering, which is kind of goes back to that Citizens United activity we did, but doing running ads and getting out information to people. Litigation was one that we didn't focus a lot on, but actually running court cases or filing court cases to try to get their interests pursued, and then going public, quote unquote, which is where like you just kind of pass out information, have a cool website, you could have your own media channel if you're the NRA, for example. Political platform is something that the political parties develop during their national convention, and what they do is they decide what their core values are, especially related to who their presidential candidate is, and then they write that up. That was going to be the next step if we had gone on to the general election in our election campaign, was for the political parties to write their platform. So all the issues we've looked at to compare liberal and conservatism have come from the political party platforms. Political Action Committee is a interest group kind of side organization, and what they do is they pool money and resources together so that they can have more of an influence on elections. um, so it's a way of interest groups to kind of get together and coordinate to have more influence. And then a lobbyist, again, was one of those people that's hired by interest groups to try to gain influence with politicians. The next one we went into was elections and campaigns. So if you think about, I mean, one of the reasons we did this election project was to kind of simulate the steps. So the first thing you have is like the opening of the campaign, where you have the candidates. They come out and they talk about their issues and they work to kind of get out information about them. They work with interest groups. They work with the electorate. And then eventually you get to the primary phase where your state might have a primary or a caucus. So you got to know the difference between those two. Caucus is used in fewer states, and it's generally just basically like a large discussion about who the candidate's going to be. And then in the primary, it's like an actual election. So that would be the next phase. After that, you have the party's convention where they officially announce a candidate, and then you go to the general election where the whole process kind of repeats itself, except now you have usually two candidates running for office, one from each party. We focus a lot on presidential elections because they're the most complex. If you understand a presidential election, you pretty much understand all the other types of elections. They're not as complicated. Also, incumbent candidate wasn't something that I specifically like defined. But for example, James Tarskin in our election project was the incumbent candidate. It's the person that's running to refill their seat. They usually win, especially in congressional elections. They win like 95% of the time. Well, in House of Representative elections, I should say. Um, this again, thinking about like coordination, money, interest group backing, whether or not the party likes you, performance in debates. There's a variety of things that go into having a successful campaign. So just being aware of some of those. Looks like I'm gonna run out of time, so I will do this a separate thing about voting and political participation, voter qualifications, so on and so forth, and these amendments. So thank you for listening. I hope this was helpful. Again, email me, like and subscribe, hit the button. Just kidding, you don't have to. But maybe I can monetize this someday. Maybe I can do some ASMR government. I'm just rambling for the last 10 seconds. All right, ciao.